Hey there, Streakers. You know from listening for a little while that I reserve Sunday for talking about the spiritual streaks that I have in my life and being a Christian, following Christ, what I do to center my life on Christ. What are the things that I do? And you know also, if you listened a few Sundays ago, I talked about 6 specific things that are what I would say are the primary ways that I focus my life on Christ. The first one that I talked about was prayer. Secondly, talking about scriptures. And today, I want to talk a little bit about why church. What is it about church that's significant in focusing yourself and myself on Christ? Since I was a little boy, I've attended church. My parents were ones that took me to church. And back in the day, when I was being raised in the church, you had church in the morning and then in the afternoon. In the morning was your primary and Sunday school classes, which was all the kids' classes, and then adults had their classes. And then in the afternoon was the big congregational meeting. And throughout the week, you'd have different activities that you would participate in on a specific day. You'd have children and youth activities and other things that you would participate in. I remember campouts that we'd go on as a congregation. All those were a blast. And one of the things that would happen in church always was partaking of bread and water in remembrance of Jesus Christ. And that pretty much happens every single Sunday. Now, the question is, why do we need to participate in church together, or do we at all? Because I look at, for example, the pandemic. In the pandemic, all the churches were basically closed, or in other words, we couldn't congregate in a way that we were all doing it together. And I remember really enjoying those times with my family. It was enjoyable to be at home, and we had permission from our congregational leader, who happened to be the bishop, to go ahead and administer the sacrament or the bread and the water for our family in our home. And it was an amazing experience. It was something that I really enjoyed, and so did the rest of the family. The question then came up is, well, do we really need to gather together? Do we need to have church buildings that dot the land so that congregations of individuals can meet together and discuss and talk about Christ? And the answer is unequivocally yes. The reason why may be something that eludes a lot of people. And I know that for me, I've never really questioned it. Maybe others have. But let me ask you this, and think of it in this way. As you work together on a daily basis in whatever your profession is, it's your career, it's your profession, do you have a tendency to improve each other? Or in other words, to help each other along the way? Maybe not in the specific responsibility or job that you have, but in the way of support, understanding, being able to commiserate with and celebrate with individuals who are sharing your specific work responsibilities. If you find that that is helpful, you also know that that is why church is helpful. Now, for me, I happen to be a managing director who is not in an office, but I talk with people every single day. Now, with the advent of Zoom and video communications, I see people in a 2-dimensional world. Interestingly, that 2-dimensional world keeps us somewhat connected. However, to feel really connected, to feel connected in a way that we trust one another, can be vulnerable with one another, and can work with one another, a 3D connection is necessary. Have you noticed that before when you meet someone in person? Here's the most common thing that I get whenever I meet anyone in person. Wow, you're a lot taller than I thought you would be. The 3-dimensional world, and I would say even, and you could say the 4th dimension, which is time, but as you look at the 3-dimensional world and consider that working with someone in a 3-dimensional situation, there is much more connection than in a 2-dimensional world. Now, I'm advocating for both, that you can have both things and that you can, with one another, work and strive to improve in both the 2-dimensional world and a 3-dimensional world. in church, it's important also to have the spiritual dimension. And the Savior says, when one or two are gathered, or when two or three, excuse me, not one or two, but when two or three are gathered in my name, behold, there I am also. There is something real about the spirit we feel with one another and testifying to one another about how we feel about Christ and what he's done for us. I was listening to one of my favorite podcasts right now, Unashamed. And Unashamed is the Duck Dynasty guys that are doing Bible study on a pretty much a daily basis. So I think it's like 3 times a week. And as I listened to them, one of the things that Jace, who is the son of Phil and also brother to Al, they're the 3 that are on there, plus Zach, who happens to be, I think, a nephew is where it is. But as I listened to them, they were talking about grace. And they were discussing about how when we do something wrong, we are looking for grace from others. I mean, come on. I know I did it wrong. I'm apologizing. I am sorry that I did that particular thing. And could you help me out with a little bit of grace? Give me forgiveness and grace. And one of the things that Jay said is, we are always looking for a dump truck load of grace. And when someone is looking for grace from us, it's a thimble or a teaspoon. The contrast of those two things really hit me. And I thought to myself, do I do that? And if I do, how do I correct for it? How do I give people a truckload of grace? And that is where I look at congregating together, seeing our foibles and our flaws, our imperfections and our difficulties. We get together on a weekly basis because we're imperfect people in an imperfect world, striving to find the perfect amount of happiness. And if we gather together, and when we gather together, and give grace to one another, and point our hearts and minds to Jesus Christ, that then allows us to become even more than what we are when we started. When we gather together, that is the place where the Savior can then enter and be with us as well. So putting Christ at the center of my life, church is an important part of that. You also hear messages and hear preaching and prophesying and understanding that gives you the opportunity to see beyond what my immediate circumstance is. In other words, rather than just seeing the week, I really start to see eternity. And that building together brings us together like nothing else. One of the things that Jamie and I often talk about is shared experiences are ones that bind us and connect us. When we share the experience of church together, it binds us and connects us in a way like nothing else can. So set a streak, go to church at least once a week, and you'll find a difference in what it is you do on a daily basis and the people who connect and support you. If you'd like to learn more about streaking, you know the place. Download the Streaking app at Google Play or the Apple App Store, or you can get the book at Audible or at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, anywhere books are sold. Until we talk again, keep streaking.